My hands are shaking as I write this. I don't know what else to do. I'm Anna, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. A loving husband, a comfortable home, a stable job as a kindergarten teacher. Nothing extraordinary, but happy. Content. Naive? That's the word, isn't it? Naive. Mark, my husband, is a construction foreman. He works hard, long hours, but he's always been a good provider. Not rich, not by any stretch, but comfortable. We own our small, 2-story house in a quiet suburb. It's not fancy, but it's ours. We've poured our sweat and savings into it. Then there's my sister, Sarah. Sarah and I. We've always been different. She's always been the wild one, the risk taker. Beautiful, effortlessly so, while I've always felt like I had to try harder. She flitted from job to job, relationship to relationship, never seeming to find her footing. She relied heavily on our parents until they couldn't anymore. When Sarah called me, sobbing, saying she'd lost her job and was about to be evicted, I didn't hesitate. Come stay with us, I told her, just until you get back on your feet. Famous last words, right? This is the story of how my life imploded, how the two people I trusted most betrayed me in the most brutal way imaginable, and how, against all odds, I'm trying to salvage something from the wreckage. I'm writing it all down because I need to remember. I need to understand how it all went so horribly wrong. And maybe, just maybe, I can help someone else avoid the same devastating fate. Sarah arrived with 2 suitcases overflowing with clothes, a cat carrier containing her grumpy Persian, Mr. Fluffernutter, yes, really, and an aura of practiced helplessness. I hugged her, trying to ignore the nagging feeling of unease that settled in my stomach. I hadn't seen Sarah in person for almost a year, and while we spoke on the phone occasionally, there was always a distance between us. We drifted apart over the years, our lives taking vastly different paths. Thank you, Anna, she sniffled, pulling back. I don't know what I would have done without you. Don't worry about it, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Family helps family. We'll figure it out. Mark, bless his heart, was immediately supportive. He helped Sarah with her bags, making small talk and trying to make her feel comfortable. He even managed to get a purr out of Mr. Fluffernutter, which was no small feat. He's always been good like that, good with people, good at putting them at ease. We set her up in the spare bedroom. It was small, but cozy. I made sure she had fresh linens, plenty of towels, and even a few of her favorite snacks. I wanted her to feel welcome, to feel safe. I truly believed I was doing the right thing. The first few weeks were okay. Sarah spent most of her time online, supposedly looking for jobs. She'd come out for meals, complaining about the lack of opportunities and how unfair life was. She also spent a lot of time talking to Mark. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Mark is a naturally friendly guy, and Sarah, well, she's always been good at charming people. They'd chat about work, about the news, about, random stuff. I was busy with my own job, grading papers and preparing lesson plans. I'd overhear snippets of their conversations, nothing that seemed alarming. But then, I started noticing little things. The lingering glances, the way Sarah would laugh a little too loudly at Mark's jokes, the way she'd always seem to find an excuse to touch his arm or brush against him. I dismissed it as my own insecurity. Sarah was my sister. Mark was my husband. They couldn't. I was being paranoid. Right? One evening, I came home early from a teacher's meeting. As I unlocked the front door, I heard laughter coming from the kitchen. It was Mark and Sarah. I hesitated, a knot tightening in my stomach. When I walked into the kitchen, they both jumped. Mark was standing a little too close to Sarah, his hand resting on the counter beside her. Sarah's cheeks were flushed and she was fiddling with her necklace. "Hey, Anna," Mark said a little too brightly. "Just helping Sarah with her resume. She's got so much experience, it's hard to condense it all. Oh, I said, my voice sounding flat even to my own ears. That's great. I forced a smile, but the unease in my gut intensified. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Terribly, terribly off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing. Was I being crazy? Was I imagining things? Or was there something actually going on between my husband and my sister? The thought was like a cold knife twisting in my heart. I decided I needed to talk to Mark, to clear the air, to put my fears to rest. Mark, I said tentatively as we lay in bed, the lights off. Can we talk? Sure, honey, he said, turning towards me. What's up? I just feel like you've been spending a lot of time with Sarah lately, he sighed. She's going through a tough time, Anna. I'm just trying to be supportive. I know, but it just feels like maybe you're being a little too supportive. He frowned. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, I said quickly. I just want to make sure everything's okay between us. He reached out and took my hand. Everything's fine, Anna. I love you. You're the one I married. Don't worry about Sarah. She's just lost. I wanted to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe him. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already starting to take root. The next few weeks were torture. I became hyper-aware of every interaction between Mark and Sarah. Every glance, every touch, every whispered conversation. I felt like I was living in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started staying up late, pretending to work on school projects, just to keep an eye on them. I'd find excuses to interrupt their conversations, to insert myself into their activities. I was acting crazy, I knew it, but I couldn't help myself. The fear of being betrayed was consuming me. And then the whispers started. It began with a casual comment from a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, while I was taking out the trash. Your sister seems to be getting along well with Mark, she said with a knowing smile. They make a lovely couple. My blood ran cold. They're not a couple, I said sharply. Mark is my husband. Sarah is my sister, Miss S. Henderson raised an eyebrow. Oh, I just assumed. They've been spending so much time together lately. Driving around in Mark's truck, going for walks in the park, I mumbled something about Sarah needing help finding a job and hurried back inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The next day, it was my friend Lisa who said something. We were having lunch together, and I had been trying to avoid the topic of Sarah and Mark. But Lisa, being the blunt and honest friend that she is, wasn't going to let me. Anna, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. Are you okay? You seem stressed, I sighed. It's Sarah. And Mark, Lisa frowned. What about them? I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. But I needed to talk to someone, to get an outside perspective. I think they might be getting a little too close, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Lisa's eyes widened. Really? You think something's going on? I shrugged. I don't know. I hope not. But I've noticed things, and people have been saying things. Lisa reached across the table and took my hand. Anna, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. I don't know what to do, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. I don't want to believe it, but I can't ignore the feeling that something's wrong. Lisa squeezed my hand. You need to confront them, Anna. You need to find out the truth. That night, I decided to take Lisa's advice. I waited until Mark and Sarah were both home, sitting in the living room, watching TV. I took a deep breath and walked in. Mark, Sarah, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Can we talk? I need to ask you something. They both looked at me, their faces registering surprise. Sure, Anna, Mark said, turning down the volume on the TV. What's up? I looked from Mark to Sarah, my heart pounding in my chest. I've been hearing things, I said. People have been saying that you two have been spending a lot of time together. That you're getting close. Sarah laughed nervously. Don't be ridiculous, Anna. Mark is just being nice to me. He's helping me get back on my feet. That's not what people are saying, I said, my voice hardening. They're saying that you're more than just friends. Mark's face flushed red. Anna, that's insane. I would never do anything like that to you. I love you. Do you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because I'm starting to doubt it. Sarah stood up, her eyes flashing with anger. How dare you accuse us of something like that? You're being paranoid and insecure. Maybe you should look at yourself instead of trying to blame us. Look at myself? I repeated, incredulous. I'm the one who's being betrayed here. Or am I? The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at Mark, searching for some sign of reassurance, some indication that he was telling the truth. But his eyes were averted, his face a mask of guilt. And in that moment, I knew that everything I had feared was true. My husband, the man I loved, was having an affair with my sister. The pain was like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled backwards, tears streaming down my face. Get out, I choked out, pointing at Sarah. Get out of my house. Now. Sarah glared at me. You can't kick me out. I have nowhere else to go. I don't care, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I want you gone. I never want to see you again. She scoffed. Fine. I'll go. But don't think you're getting rid of me that easily. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I turned to Mark, my eyes filled with tears and betrayal. How could you do this to me? I whispered. How could you betray me like this? He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his head bowed, his face filled with shame. Get out, I said again, my voice barely audible. Just get out. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pain. Anna, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, shaking my head. I don't want to hear it. Just go. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked out of the house, leaving me standing alone in the living room. My world shattered into a million pieces. The next few days were a blur of tears, anger, and disbelief. I called Lisa and told her everything. She came over immediately and stayed with me, offering comfort and support. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, replaying the events of the past few weeks in my mind, trying to understand how I could have been so blind, so naive. Mark called several times, leaving messages on my voicemail, begging me to talk to him. I ignored them all. I couldn't bring myself to speak to him. The thought of hearing his voice, of seeing his face, filled me with revulsion. Sarah, of course, didn't call. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and wallow in my misery. I needed to take action, to reclaim my life. I started by calling a lawyer. I needed to understand my options, to protect myself. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Davis, listened patiently as I recounted my story. She asked me a lot of questions, taking notes on a legal pad. Okay, Anna, she said when I was finished. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to file for divorce. Second, we're going to make sure you get everything you're entitled to. And third, we're going to protect you from any further harassment from your sister. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. The divorce proceedings were ugly. Mark tried to argue that it was a mutual decision, that we had simply grown apart. I refused to let him rewrite history. I wanted the truth to be known. I wanted everyone to know that he had cheated on me with my sister. The gossip in our small town was rampant. People whispered behind my back, offering pitying glances and awkward condolences. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my job and my friends. But it was hard. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being judged, pitied, or even blamed. One day I received a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. I ripped open the envelope and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was Sarah's, but the tone was different. It was cold, calculating, and almost threatening. Dear Anna, the letter began. I know you're angry with me, but I need you to understand something. Mark and I are in love. We're meant to be together. And we're going to be together no matter what it takes. My blood ran cold. I'm pregnant, the letter continued, with Mark's baby. We're going to start a new life together, a family. And you're not going to stand in our way, I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Pregnant? With Mark's baby? The letter went on to say that Mark was unhappy with me for years. I never understood him. But Sarah did, and she was going to be a better wife to him. I know this is hard for you to accept, the letter concluded. But it's the truth, and the sooner you accept it, the better. Move on, Anna. Find someone else. Leave Mark to me. It's what's best for everyone. I crumpled the letter in my fist, tears of rage and despair streaming down my face. This was beyond betrayal. This was a calculated act of cruelty. Sarah wasn't just trying to steal my husband. She was trying to steal my life. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to fight back. I had to protect myself. I called Miss Davis and told her about the letter. She was furious. This is harassment, Anna, she said. We're going to get a restraining order against your sister. She's not allowed to contact you or come near you ever again. I felt a surge of relief. Finally, I was taking control of the situation. I was standing up for myself. But the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, I received another unexpected visitor. It was Mark. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. His clothes were rumpled, and he hadn't shaved in days. Anna, he said, his voice hoarse. We need to talk. I hesitated, then reluctantly let him in. I couldn't bring myself to completely shut him out. Part of me, deep down, still loved him. Or at least, loved the man I thought he was. He sat down on the couch, avoiding my gaze. I know I messed up, Anna, he said. I made a terrible mistake. I'm so sorry. Sorry? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, Mark. You cheated on me with my sister. You got her pregnant. You destroyed my life. He winced. I know. And I'm going to do everything I can to make it right. How? I asked, my voice trembling. How can you possibly make this right? He took a deep breath. Sarah wants me to ask you for something. I narrowed my eyes. What does she want? He hesitated again. She wants you to leave the house. I stared at him, dumbfounded. What? She wants you to move out, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. She thinks it's the best thing for everyone. She thinks it's the only way we can move on and start our new life together. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own sister, the woman I had taken in and tried to help, was now trying to steal my house. And my husband, the man I had loved and trusted, was helping her. You're serious? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. You actually want me to leave my own house? The house that I worked so hard for? So that you and Sarah can move in and play happy family? He nodded, his eyes filled with shame. She says it's because you're too attached to this place. That it's holding you back. That you need to move on and find your own happiness. And you agree with her? I asked, my voice rising. You think that kicking me out of my own house is the best way for me to find happiness? He didn't answer. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. Get out, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. I never want to see you again. He stood up, his face filled with pain. Anna, please, don't do this. Do what? I screamed. Do what you and Sarah have already done to me? Destroy everything I've ever loved? He turned and walked out of the house, leaving me standing alone in the living room, my heart broken and my spirit crushed. This was it. This was the ultimate betrayal. They weren't just content with ruining my marriage and stealing my happiness. They wanted to take everything from me. my home, my security, my sense of self-worth, but I wasn't going to let them. I wasn't going to give up. I was going to fight back. I was going to reclaim my life. I was going to keep my house. I spent the next few days researching my legal options. I learned about property rights, divorce laws, and the rights of a spouse in a community property state. I armed myself with knowledge, determined to protect myself and my home. Miss Davis was equally determined. She filed a motion to prevent Mark from selling or transferring any assets during the divorce proceedings. She also started gathering evidence of Mark's affair and Sarah's manipulative behavior. "We're going to make sure you get everything you deserve, Anna," she said. "And we're going to make sure they don't get away with anything." Meanwhile, the first started looking for ways to make extra money. I took on extra tutoring jobs, sold some of my belongings online, and even started doing some freelance writing. I knew I needed to be financially independent to prove that I could support myself without Mark's help. The stress was overwhelming. I was working long hours dealing with the emotional fallout of the divorce and constantly worrying about my future. I felt like I was running on fumes, barely holding it together, but I refused to give up. I knew I had to stay strong, for myself and for my future. One evening, as I was working late, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Leave the house, Anna," the message read. "It's not worth fighting for. You'll only get hurt." I shuddered. I knew it was Sarah. Even though I had a restraining order against her, she was still finding ways to harass me. I deleted the message and blocked the number, but the fear lingered. I knew that Sarah wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted. I decided I needed to take extra precautions. I installed a security system in my house, changed the locks, and even started taking self-defense classes. I wanted to be prepared for anything. One day, I came home from work to find my house ransacked. The front door was kicked in, furniture was overturned, and my belongings were scattered everywhere. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran through the house, checking to see if anything was missing. Luckily, it seemed like nothing had been stolen. But the message was clear. Sarah was escalating her tactics. She was trying to scare me into leaving. I called the police, and they came and took a report. They said they would investigate, but I knew that it would be difficult to prove who was responsible. I felt violated and vulnerable. I couldn't believe that Sarah would stoop so low. I called Miss Davis and told her what had happened. She was furious. "This is a violation of the restraining order," she said. "We're going to file criminal charges against your sister. She's going to pay for this." But even with the legal action, I knew that I couldn't rely solely on the police to protect me. I needed to take matters into my own hands. I decided to install security cameras around my house, both inside and out. I wanted to have evidence of any further harassment or violence. I also started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. I knew it wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I was determined to protect myself and my home, no matter what it took. The criminal charges against Sarah were filed, and she was ordered to appear in court. She pleaded not guilty, claiming that she had nothing to do with the break-in. But I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes. The trial was a circus. Sarah's lawyer tried to paint me as a jealous and vengeful ex-wife, trying to ruin her life. He argued that there was no evidence linking Sarah to the break-in, and that I was simply trying to get revenge for the affair. I took the stand and told my story. I described the harassment, the threats, and the fear that I had been living with for months. I testified about the devastating impact that Sarah and Mark's affair had had on my life. The jury listened intently. They seemed to be sympathetic to my plight. After several days of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. They found Sarah guilty of violating the restraining order and of criminal mischief. I burst into tears of relief. Finally, justice was being served. Sarah was sentenced to probation and ordered to stay away from me and my property. She was also required to attend anger management classes. I felt a sense of triumph. I had stood up to my sister and won. But the battle wasn't over yet. The divorce proceedings were still ongoing, and Mark was still trying to get me to leave the house. He had filed a motion asking the court to order me to sell the house and split the proceeds with him. He argued that it was the only fair way to divide our assets. I refused to agree. I wasn't going to let him force me out of my home. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. Miss Davis prepared a strong case, arguing that I had made significant contributions to the house over the years, both financially and through sweat equity. She also pointed out that Mark's affair had caused significant emotional distress and financial hardship. The judge listened carefully to both sides. He seemed to be sympathetic to my situation. After several weeks of deliberation, the judge issued his ruling. He ordered that I be allowed to keep the house, provided that I pay Mark a fair share of its current market value. I was ecstatic. I had won. I had kept my house. I knew it would be difficult to come up with the money to pay Mark, but I was determined to do it. I started saving every penny I could, and I even took out a small loan to cover the difference. It wasn't easy, but I was finally starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece. As the dust settled from the divorce and the criminal trial, I started to focus on healing and moving on. I continued to work hard at my job, spent time with my friends, and even started exploring new hobbies. I also started attending therapy. I needed help processing the trauma I had experienced and learning how to trust again. My therapist, Dr. Miller, was a kind and compassionate woman. She helped me understand that I was not to blame for what had happened, that Mark and Sarah's actions were a reflection of their own character flaws, not of my worth as a person. One day, during a therapy session, Dr. Miller asked me a question that changed everything. "Anna," she said, "have you ever wondered why Sarah was so determined to steal your husband and your house?" I frowned. "I don't know," I said. "I always thought she was just jealous of me, that she wanted what I had." Dr. Miller nodded. "That may be part of it," she said, "but I think there's something more to it. Something deeper." She paused. "Have you ever considered that Sarah might have believed that Mark was wealthy?" I laughed. "Wealthy? Mark? He's a construction foreman. He makes a decent living, but he's not rich." "But did Sarah know that?" Dr. Miller asked. "Did she ever see evidence to the contrary?" I thought about it for a moment. Sarah had always been attracted to money and status. She had dated several wealthy men in the past, and she had always seemed to equate wealth with happiness. I also remembered that Mark had always been good at managing money. He had always been frugal and responsible, and he had always made sure that we lived within our means. But he had also been secretive about our finances. He didn't like to talk about money, and he often downplayed his income. I realized that Sarah might have gotten the wrong impression. She might have believed that Mark was much wealthier than he actually was. And if that was the case, then her actions made a lot more sense. She wasn't just trying to steal my husband. She was trying to steal his money. I felt a surge of anger. I had been so focused on the emotional betrayal that I had overlooked the financial aspect of it all. Sarah wasn't just a homewrecker. She was a gold digger. I decided to investigate further. I started going through our old financial records, looking for any clues that might support my theory. And then I found something. Hidden in a box of old tax returns, I discovered a document that I had never seen before. It was a stock certificate made out to Mark for a significant number of shares in a small construction company. I did some research and discovered that the company had been acquired by a larger corporation several years ago. Mark had received a substantial payout from the acquisition. He had never told me about it. I felt betrayed all over again. Mark had been keeping secrets from me for years. He had lied to me about his finances, and he had allowed Sarah to believe that he was wealthy. I realized that I had been living a lie. I had thought that I knew my husband, but I didn't. He was a completely different person than I had imagined. I confronted Mark about the stock certificate. He admitted that he had received the payout, but he claimed that he had planned to tell me about it eventually. I just didn't know how, he said. I was afraid you would change. I was afraid you would start spending all my money. I was disgusted. He had accused me of being a gold digger when he was the one who had been keeping secrets about his wealth. I knew that I couldn't stay married to him even if he wanted me back. The trust was gone. I couldn't forgive him for his betrayal. I contacted Miss Davis and told her about the stock certificate. She was furious. This changes everything, she said. We're going to reopen the divorce proceedings and demand a larger settlement. You're entitled to half of that money. I felt a sense of vindication. Finally, I was going to get what I deserved. The divorce proceedings were reopened, and the battle over Mark's hidden wealth began. His lawyers fought hard to protect his assets, arguing that the stock certificate was a premarital asset and that I was not entitled to any of it. But Miss Davis was relentless. She presented evidence that Mark had commingled the money with our marital assets, and that I had made significant contributions to the increase in its value. After several weeks of legal wrangling, the judge issued his ruling. He ordered that I be awarded a significant portion of Mark's hidden wealth, enough to ensure that I was financially secure for the rest of my life. I felt a surge of relief and satisfaction. I had finally gotten justice. I had finally held Mark accountable for his actions. Meanwhile, Sarah's life was falling apart. The father of her child was not the wealthy man she thought he was. Mark, now divorced and financially drained, was struggling to make ends meet. He was working longer hours, and he was barely able to provide for Sarah and their baby. Sarah was miserable. She had thought that she was going to live a life of luxury, but instead she was stuck in a tiny apartment, struggling to pay the bills. She tried to contact me, begging me to forgive her and to help her. But I refused. I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. I learned that she eventually moved away, seeking a fresh start somewhere far from our town and from Mark. As for Mark, he seemed to finally understand the magnitude of his mistakes. He attempted to reach out several times, but I simply couldn't bring myself to even acknowledge him. He would forever be a painful reminder of the worst betrayal in my life. With the divorce finalized and the legal battles behind me, I was finally able to focus on rebuilding my life. I used the money I had received in the divorce settlement to pay off my debts, invest in my future, and create a secure financial foundation for myself. I continued to work as a kindergarten teacher, and I found joy in helping young children learn and grow. I also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, offering support and guidance to women who had experienced similar situations to mine. I discovered that helping others was a powerful way to heal my own wounds. It gave me a sense of purpose and meaning, and it helped me to move on from the pain and anger that had consumed me for so long. I started dating again, but I was cautious and selective. I was determined not to make the same mistakes again. I learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my intuition, and to prioritize my own happiness. I eventually met a wonderful man named David. He was kind, compassionate, and honest. He treated me with respect and valued my opinions. We fell in love, and we built a strong and healthy relationship based on trust, communication, and mutual respect. A few years later, we got married. It was a small and intimate ceremony, surrounded by our closest friends and family. I felt like I had finally found my happy ending. I had overcome the challenges and setbacks that life had thrown my way, and I had emerged stronger and more resilient. I had learned that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, it is possible to find love, happiness, and a new beginning. Looking back on everything that happened, I can see that it was a painful and difficult journey. But it was also a journey that taught me valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of self-worth. I learned that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, even from those closest to you. I learned that trust is a fragile thing and that once it is broken, it can be difficult to repair. I learned that you cannot control the actions of others, but you can control how you respond to them. I learned that it is important to stand up for yourself, to protect your boundaries, and to fight for what is rightfully yours. I learned that forgiveness is a process, not an event, and that it is possible to forgive without forgetting. And most importantly, I learned that you are strong enough to overcome anything that life throws your way. You are resilient. You are worthy of love and happiness, and you deserve to live a life filled with joy and purpose. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Don't let anyone dim your light. Shine brightly and never give up on your dreams. Because even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a new beginning.